Hi, and welcome to the Surf Academy UK podcast. I'm your host, Ross James. This podcast is to help surfers of all levels up their game through coaching and training. All our guests have extensive experience in the industry and can offer great advice and guidance. So whether you're a beginner, weekend warrior, or just love to be in the water, follow us on this journey and don't forget to like and subscribe. Stay stoked and stay healthy. So, welcome to Surf Academy UK podcast, Nick. How you doing?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be on with you, talk about a few things.
Yeah, pleasure to have you here. Taking time away from the massive swells that have been hitting Cornwall the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, no, it's good to have. Well, it sounds crazy to say, but it feels good to be at the end of it, really. And I think a lot of people are saying, they kind of bodies need a rest, they need to do some work, need to catch up on their admin, whatever, life, family, everything like that, because it has been quite. It's been a long period as well, long period. So yeah,
that's it. Nice. Well, just so some of the listeners and viewers can get to know you a bit, can you give us a bit of a description on yourself?
Yeah, I'm a lifelong surfer, over 30 years of surfing. Dragged myself away from inland living when I was 16 in order to pursue surfing as a life. I ran a surf school for my own surf school for about 14 years. I was surf coaching all in all for about 18 years. I'm also a second degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, which I've found to have real nice crossovers with the culture, some of the physicality, benefits from one sport to the other. Yeah, family man, got 3 kids, introducing them to surfing. Yeah, that's me.
Amazing. So, where did you move from, if you don't mind me asking, when you were a kid?
Yeah, I grew up in Buckinghamshire and my dad actually lived in central London. So I was sort of between those two things. I had a best friend growing up, and we were both interested in surfing, and it would be either of our parents that would take us down to Bournemouth or to West Wittering. So that was from about 11 years old, that we would do bits of that. I'd have trips to Portugal for family holidays and I'd try and do a little bit of surfing there. And then, yeah, I'd work experience when I was 15 in Newquay for 2 weeks, and sort of said at the end of that 2 weeks, I don't really want to go home. Had to go back, but I was then back the following summer, or that summer, for 6 weeks on my own, camping in a garden at 15, and with £100 in my pocket. So from Buckinghamshire to Cornwall at 15, and just surfed all day long. And then the following year, finished my GCSEs, packed up out of there, on the train the very next day, moved to Newquay, got a job in a hotel, got a bed sit. Just that was it. I was just immersed in surfing.
It's a bit of a Neverland, isn't it, Newquay? Like, there's a lot of people that sort of migrate there.
It is a Neverland, and I wouldn't want to say this to be sort of derogatory of the town, but it can be difficult then sometimes if you forget that you still actually have to pursue some way of educating yourself, earning a living. And I think there's been various times over the years being here, and just all I want to do is just run down and go surf. And I've had times where that's all I've done. And then you reach a bump in the road and you realize you've got to do something with your life. And actually, I think for me, one of the biggest moments of that was discovering Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and having that martial art and that discipline to kind of teach me that there are things I can do as well as surf and collaborate things together and still have a life within surfing, and a life that feels really healthy and all about that stuff, but find a way to make money and just be a good person, a benefit in the community. And it doesn't have to be, I've done that with a martial art. It doesn't have to be that, but it could be that whatever you do as a job. But how can you fit that in to work with your surfing if that's what you love to do? And I think it's really healthy to address that, because otherwise you could end up being 50 years old, broken physically because all you've done is surf, eating bad and thinking you can party like you're 20, and be completely broke as well. And you're not doing any surfing, you won't have good living, you won't have people around you anymore. And I think that can be a danger of that Neverland idea. We will all get old eventually, so you have to look after yourself physically, mentally, and like how will you sort of prosper in your life to whatever level you need to.
I think that is one of the sort of, I don't know, backhand advantages of Nuki is it can really show you who you are deep down. Do you have that willpower? Do you have that strength? I mean, I'd spent the first couple of years on and off renting rooms in hotels or Matt Surf Lodge. I've done a couple of rounds in there. And it's quite easy to just get bored into that lifestyle. Just pop down at Belushi's for one, and suddenly it's 5 a.m. Not again. So, yeah, finding something to focus on 100%. So, you mentioned your Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. How long have you been doing that now?
I've been doing it for 15 years now, training Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I started in Nuki in Concept Gym, as it goes. And back in the day when I started in 2010, they were very MMA focused, which is cool. That's what I'd been watching. And so I was interested in all round sort of stuff, striking and grappling. And yeah, I got into that there. And then I also discovered a Brazilian that was living in Cornwall. And so I started to go to his club that he had and started developing with him and with Concept, but then I actually moved away for a year. So I reached one of those bumps in the road where I realized I needed to go and earn some money. So I actually went back up country for a year, actually a year and a half, and I was doing an office job. I was training jiu-jitsu up there as well under a club affiliated to Roger Gracie, who's one of the greatest competitors of all time. And that gave me a really interesting access to the wider world of jiu-jitsu and how I can sort of, I'm fortunate enough to build connections in that wider world very quickly through that affiliation. But 18 months was enough inland again. So I sorted my finances out and then came back down to Cornwall and carried on training with the Brazilian that was here. And then eventually, through a few bends in the road, ended up with my own club. From sort of 5 years of training, I suppose, I ended up with my own small club, and I've been kind of doing that ever since. And I've been a black belt now for 6 years. So that makes me a second degree black belt. And I'm still connected and affiliated with the club that I trained with when I went up all those years ago. So they're based in Aylesbury and very closely connected, as I said, to Roger Gracie, and that's my affiliation. So even from Nuki, having realized, I needed to address stuff in my own life, I've managed to do something that reached out beyond the community here and then brought something back into the community. So now we've got this great club that's widely connected, and just through, getting disciplined, getting serious about something, I really think something like a martial art, and jiu-jitsu is a great one, can help you to find a really good path.
Yeah, that's amazing. And definitely it's surfers definitely need to find a bit of discipline sometimes, don't they? It's easy to go, oh, waves are up, let's go. You don't know when it's coming next.
It's a funny thing though, because surfers are very disciplined because by the nature of what they do. But unfortunately, for most people, surfing doesn't give them anything tangible back. It gives them a great feeling. It can develop a great skill. They show such perseverance because when you start to learn to surf, it's a terrible hurdle to overcome. Like, you can just about get to your feet, and then they say the good waves are out there. You got to paddle out, and now you don't know how to duck dive. And one day you're feeling great. The next day the waves are 6 foot. You're not going anywhere. Even if you get there, none of the other surfers are just going to let you have the waves. And so it's a real battle from start to finish. And people that carry on and persevere through that have showed a lot of grit and determination. But it's how do you get that? How do you take that, what you've learned, those lessons, and transfer it into the real world and convince people in the real world that those are really good attributes of yours? And it's difficult. But surfers don't help themselves because, I know plenty of people, tradies as well, particularly, right, who'll drop their tools because the surf's good. Who can blame them? But when you can't do that in a corporate office environment. You can do it if you work for yourself. But you just have to realize if you're going to drop your tools and go surfing, you've got some catching up to do. And tools can be anything. It could be your sanders because you're saw because you're a carpenter. It could just be that you're running your own online business and your tools, your laptop and your network and stuff like that. If you're not talking to them because you're surfing, people get fed up waiting. But I think that the discipline is there. It's just learning to transfer that you can do because you love surfing. If you've got a goal aside from surfing, like you want to make some money, you want to build a house. It's like, right, what did I learn from surfing? How did I get so good at that? How do I go and achieve that other goal that I want?
Yeah, there's definitely transferable skills. And like you say, it's funny, surfers will get that work-life balance, but sometimes it can just easily, the scales will tip that little bit
In
too
the
much.
last 2 weeks,
Yeah.
especially.
In terms of transferable skills, I've done a few martial arts over the years, just dabbling. Karate as a kid up until my teens. Although the sensei, it started off 20 minutes of football as a warm up because we were all teenagers. It's the easy one. Ended up in the hour and a half session. It used to be about an hour of football. It was like, well, we can go down a rec for this. So I've not really, I've had a taste of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, but it was one session. So all I was learning to do was how to fall properly. What transferable skills do you say you've learned from Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and surfing, or vice versa?
Well, there's that perseverance, and jiu-jitsu and surfing are very similar at the beginning because, like I said before, about being a beginner surfer and starting to think about paddling out, it's such a battle. I used to teach surfing for a long time, and I'd show people how to get to their feet, and then the ocean would have different ideas. They do it on the beach, no problem, but the ocean and the waves have completely different ideas. You talk to somebody about paddling out, completely different ideas, and also then when we teach people martial arts, if I show them how to apply, say, a joint lock or a choke on an opponent, it's like, great. They practice with a compliant opponent and they get the mechanics of it. And they're like, that seems quite straightforward. I remember this from one of my first lessons, learning how to put somebody in a joint lock. But when you get to sparring with an opponent who doesn't want to let you do it, they sort of know what you're up to because we're doing the same sport together, then it becomes a real battle to put that into practice. So you've got to have that determination and the grit. If you're a learner surfer or a learner in jiu-jitsu, you're going to get a beat down, basically. It's not like it's going to hurt. It doesn't hurt paddling out in that you can't get out there. But I used to cry trying to paddle out because I'm getting washed back in again. I'm nearly there and the set comes washing me back in again. And I think inside, when you're doing jiu-jitsu and learning and sparring and people are better than you, inside you're crying a little bit because you're like, I just want to get this guy off me and turn the table a little bit, but you can't. So you're going to have to learn what it takes to deal with being really uncomfortable, being in an uncomfortable situation and trying to chip away and work towards what your goals are. And you realize that, perseverance and time, are things that you got to have the patience for. So you got to have patience. You're also going to develop trust because by the nature of what we do in jiu-jitsu, we're going to strangle each other and we're going to put each other in joint locks and somebody's going to get on top of you and hold you down. And when you reach the point of submission, you're going to tap and they're going to let go. That's the trust. Okay. And there's a trust that we're going to operate within a certain rule set. So we don't have striking in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for the sport side of it. So when you're getting involved in sparring with people, if they're feeling uncomfortable and frustrated, you trust that they're not going to lose it and give you a slap. It'd be game over for them. They'd be out the door. They have to you have to have the trust and they have to develop control. And these are things that cross over into the real world on a daily basis. And people that don't have that, if they don't have the determination and perseverance and dedication to something, if they can't deal with being uncomfortable, it's going to be difficult to achieve things in the workplace, professionally, with relationships. If you can't learn to trust people, if you can't give something in order to get something back, and if you can't communicate with people and understand some commonality, is that how will you get on? These things cross over really heavily into the real world. I hope I've not gone off on one too much.
No, not at all. I mean, I think the only word I throw into that is just consistency, which is key for anything. And it keeps throwing up and throwing up. I think in a world of attention spans, ADHD, and social media, it's more important now than ever. Just you're not going to get the benefit of a video someone's put up if all you're doing is watching 2.5 seconds and go, no, no, no. You need to be able to go, right, okay, watch the full video. Was it use? No. Can I take anything from it? Maybe. But unless you're going to put that dedication into something, you're never going to see the result. People are flitting here, there, and everywhere, whatever it might be. If you just spend 5 minutes trying to paddle out at a beach break, and it's anything above 2 to 3 foot, 5 minutes might not cut it, especially if you're struggling in duck dive or you're on a mini mow and it's messy. All that sort of stuff. You got to be able to go, right, give it a serious attempt. I mean, I've surfed for 20 years, since about 2003. And I was out at Harlin a few weeks back with my mate Reese runs lifeguard courses. We both got humbled. I hope he doesn't mind me saying this on a podcast, but Harlin must have, it was only about 4 to 6 foot. It wasn't anything massive, but it was northerly. The wind was a bit onshore, and there was a lot of whitewater and power moving around. Just trying to get out the back, like, you know what? I can't even see the lineup. Like, it's just bang, 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 5 minutes. And I could almost see myself getting pulled back. I was trying to line myself up with sellers. I was like, right, you know what? Let's call it a day. We'll go somewhere else. But yeah, it's just being able to have that consistency and go, right, I need to get my time management sorted. I need to look at where the end goal and then bring it back in bite-sized chunks. Like, say, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, I want to be able to put someone in a lock, but how is that going to happen? Well, I need to be able to feel what they're doing. Where's their weight going to go? I suppose that could be, for you, a difference in where you're going to move your hips in order to get around and blah, blah, blah. Like I say, I've not really done it, so I can't say, but
you're spot on with that, and you see the social media points are a real great one, and how people have this attention deficit, and we're all going to be vulnerable to it. I'm definitely vulnerable to it. 1 minute of scrolling, which might be important. In fact, I use social media to promote my business, and it's a necessary evil. I have to get the message out there. But as soon as I start doing something, I can get caught in other people's social media, and I'm now looking at stuff, and obviously I'm targeted by the algorithm. But nothing will be more real as something to do than surfing or jiu-jitsu, because when you're in those environments, those things, social media doesn't exist, technology doesn't exist. If you're on the mat grappling with somebody, nothing exists other than what you're doing right there. And if you're surfing, nothing will exist whilst you're trying to paddle out. You can't even think about anything but the next wave you've got to get through. And the consistency that you're talking about is just, look, we've got a club, we're open 5 nights a week and in the daytime sometimes. So we can occupy your time, get you away from the fakeness that's available in the world. Just wants you to, look for 2 seconds and look at the next thing and look at the next thing, get on the mat and get real, because that's where life's happening. And it does happen and to be honest, to be fair, it happens in the workplace. Workplace requires you to do that. But I think that, and it doesn't matter what your work is, it could be anything. You could be a chef, you could be in an office, you could be, on the tools somewhere, you could be a factory worker, but they will require your boss or your job, the requirement will require you to be present. And again, that's just something that you can, spend your free time doing as well, by surfing or doing jiu-jitsu.
exactly. I think having something like that, obviously, any sort of martial art, you've got someone coming at you in one form or another, or you're focusing on the kata, or again, it's having that highly focused moment. That's meditative, no matter what you're doing, surfing, whether it's a 2 foot day, you're just having a good time and the blue sky's out, or if it's 18-foot at cribber, you've definitely got to be focusing on what you're doing. You can't be thinking about, oh, I've got this bill, the credit card's coming out and blah, blah, blah. You can't be focusing on any of that. So,
and life comes at you like that too, sometimes. And if you're not focused because you spend your time, too much time on the social media, when life comes knocking and you suddenly like, how do I get my head in gear to conquer the real problems that I've got? If your rent's gone up and your friend's going out of your life, or your girlfriend's dumped you, or whatever it might be, it's like, well, you need to be able to channel your focus a bit to what life's throwing at you. If you're too distracted walking down the street, you get run over by a car. And things happen, and you've got to be able to face them. You got to be able to square up to them and not be too distracted too easily, because how are you going to square up to the problems in life and if you're easily distracted?
100%. So from a physical standpoint, In terms of the again transferable skills between sort of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and surfing, what have you noticed?
Well, there's a real nice balance thing because in the balance of your body, not like whether you can stand on one foot, although that will appear through both sports. Um, in surfing, you spend 90% of your time with a hyperextended back paddling your surfboard. You've got your stretched out abs, stretched out hip flexors, your lower back muscles are overly strengthened, possibly your upper back, depending on your mechanics. And you've got your head up, the back of your neck super strong. And in jiu-jitsu, it's completely the opposite. You'll be hunched over, your hip flexors are shortening, your abs are tightening, your lower back's getting stretched out and weakened, your neck muscles in the front are going to be developed from doing jiu-jitsu. If you're doing both, they have real nice balance to one to the other. So where one, if you just did jiu-jitsu, you get end up with what's called a grappler stoop, where you kind of like this everywhere you go. And I think if you see somebody that only ever surfs, I'd say the classic 19, 20-year-old lad who's sort of like this because their back muscles are pulling them back. They got nothing else in their life at that point other than surf. So, their back muscles are pulling them all back there. So if you've got these two sports and they can complement each other by doing the opposite thing, I think that can be beneficial. But they have very different cardio needs, paddling a surfboard for 90% of the time in a surf is pretty low output endurance kind of stuff. There's a few bits when a set's coming. There's a few bits of explosive when you want to catch a wave, but the majority of it's pretty slow and steady. In jiu-jitsu, we spar for 5 minutes typically, and it can be pretty high intensity. 5 minutes of sort of trying to out wrestle your opponent. There's no time where you're sitting waiting for something to happen. It's all sort of go. I mean, the better you get, the more you can control the situation. So as a black belt, if I'm sparring with one of my lower belts, I can settle them down, squash them a little bit, take a bit of a nice rest there, and they're just wearing me, so
Yeah.
a horrible cheap suit. But generally, they can benefit each other. I mean, that the feeling that you get from having developed the ability to get some poundings in the surf where you've got to hold your breath and stay calm. Well, if you take that back into a sparring environment, nobody's going to tax you for your oxygen because you can breathe the entire time. People will squash you, but in jiu-jitsu, but if you can be relaxed, they won't squeeze the air out of you. I mean, unless they get literally around your neck, but just by applying a bit of pressure, the surfing can help. And then, from a jiu-jitsu perspective, people are always trying to sweep you, take you down, knock you off your feet, put you on your back and take your legs away and this kind of stuff. And if you can start to really read all those situations and become very difficult to put on your back and very difficult to be taken down. When you're surfing and the conditions are bumpy and windy and powerful waves, your legs are going to be far more capable of controlling a board and dealing with those things that happen. Yeah. But this really does still apply alongside good technique, because if you don't have any technique, you'll be as physically strong from one to the other, doesn't matter. Nothing's going to make any difference if you haven't developed the technique in the required sport. But I've noticed that over the last few years, developing my strength and conditioning for jiu-jitsu, and by doing jiu-jitsu has really helped with my surfing, maintaining myself on my feet when things getting a bit bumpy and a bit rough. And it's a little bit harder for the waves in certain situations to just sort of chip me off and find myself on my face.
I suppose where your body's going to move in all these weird and wonderful positions on the mat, the level mobility you must have that's essential is extremely high. So again, that would be another really good crossover for the surfing, and having them extra, I suppose, to take myself, for example, although I don't train for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So if I was to come to you for a couple of weeks and go, right, want to nail some fundamentals, I'm probably going to have muscles that are going to appear almost from nowhere. Your body's going to go, I completely forgot they were there. I suppose the adductors, your glute medius, all that's just going to go, good morning, how's it going?
Or they'll be so strained you'll walk away. Yeah. I can't walk.
Yeah.
But yeah, the mobilities are really, so I think, and you probably agree, you work in the physical world of training and stuff, it's often really misunderstood. You know, there's a lot of surfers who will want to go and do yoga, for example. Yoga is so popular within surf retreats, and it's not a bad thing necessarily to a point. You know, stretching out muscles, as long as you understand what you're doing, you know, stretching out sore muscles at the end of a training session, at the end of a swell, at the end of a busy week of surfing, all good. But it isn't going to necessarily improve your surfing or your ability to perform on a wave. But your mobility, your ability to move in tight spots, that can be on a wave as well as on a mat with an opponent. That's a completely different thing. It has nothing to do with flexibility. It's like, how can you leverage yourself around a position, use your joints, and find a way to shift your weight? And that's like mobility to me. And I
No,
train a lot of stuff that complements it for jiu-jitsu, and it definitely complements it for surfing.
exactly. I was having a chat, doing a recording earlier for another episode with this guy I worked with up at the Wave, Jules. He was a surf coach, fireman. He was on the Nimrods in the RAF, and we were saying about how we got onto stretching and how that a lot of people confuse flexibility, mobility, and they just assume that they're together. You're like, yes, yoga is good. However, I said, you can be super flexible, touch your toes, sit in a deep squat, but if you can't get out of it, there's not much point. So, and again, this is where jiu-jitsu would be a fantastic example. If you're down on the floor and yes, you've got the flexibility to get into that position, you grapple someone in. If you haven't got that strength in your glutes, your hips, your core, and your legs to actually twist and push them back up, well, it's probably going to be game over pretty sharpish. And same with surfing. I use the example of if you come off your bottom turn and you're doing a nice big old top turn or snap, but you've got a real chunky lip to try and get round. If you come up and you're really flexible, but you've not got the strength, that lip's just going to push the base of your board, and you're going to be on the next
Your legs will be up.
you'll be on the next wipeout wheel. Whereas if you've got some decent leg strength, everything, hips, whole core, lower body, if you're training for mobility rather than flexibility, you're going to have the strength to brace and hold that for a moment and be able to physically push your board through the lip. And that's where you get your nice big spray from. And that's what people get confused about. They're like, yeah, but I do 16 yoga sessions a week and I'm super flexible and I can do this. And it's like, brilliant. I can't. Well done. But for me, I'm not interested in that. I can still get into a full squat, come up with it with a load of weight on the back, and that's going to help with the surfing. So it is sport specific. So yeah, it is definitely a common misunderstanding between the flexibility and mobility. How often would you say, I suppose actually just sparring is pretty good workout for mobility anyway. Do you do training alongside it? I suppose I'm trying to ask.
Yeah, sparring, you know, the problem that can come with sparring, especially when you get better, is that you will have repetitive techniques that you like, and you're going to just keep refining and honing and stuff. And a lot of those things can become one-sided. I might have a certain side I like to use a certain sweep on to sweep somebody over one way, and different submission attacks to go the other way. And if I'm standing, you know, a lot like surfing, I might have my right foot forward all the time. And there are various elements that are very one-sided. And so whilst it does illustrate my ability to move very well, I try and do things that will balance me out. I trained in gymnastica natural so that I could teach that, and that derived from jiu-jitsu. It was a high-level Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt that developed a system, and it's not that dissimilar to a lot of the sort of animal flow movements and things like that. And those things address the balance, and they use mobility, but they use it, you know, both sides, and they use very different, you know, a multitude of different approaches of moving around like an animal. And I think that's one of the best things you can do for mobility. But I also do lifting, nothing crazy, but I have a strength program set to me by actually one of my students, a guy called Anthony Mullally, who's an ex-pro rugby league player. And he's got pretty good mobility. He's 6'4". It's not got an ounce of fat on him. You know, he's a strong man, and he's a blue belt in jiu-jitsu with me. And I'm like, well, look, if it's good for him and he's moving well at that size, I'm going to do it. He'd probably say, oh, he's still trying to develop mobility from me. But, you need to have the strength in your joints for the mobility as well. So it's all good and well moving around like a monkey, just much like it's all good and well being bendy, but you still need to build up some weight loaded. Personally, I feel like you need to build up some weight loaded resistance into
Yeah.
your training program, and that's what I try to do. I've actually had a little bit of time off for a few different reasons, and this swell hasn't helped either. So I'll try not to burn a candle both ends with training, but certainly as we go into this next period where the swell's not so good and it's stormy, I'll definitely be back in the gym and just funk basic lifts, crazy, couple of times a week, 3 times a week maybe. And I've noticed a huge difference: injury prevention, reduction of soreness. There's a lot of jokes in the jiu-jitsu world that, oh, I wake up and I can't, I feel like a cripple. I'm like 25 sort of thing. It's like, it doesn't have to be that way. You're just not doing anything to support your body. You might not be, your nutrition might be bad, your hydration might be bad, but definitely feel that doing a little bit of lifting is really going to help you to build a bit of body armor. And that will apply for surfing. I've seen really good surfers who've just fallen apart over the years. Guys that I knew growing up who now not a chance. And they were so far and away better than me, and they're now not doing it. And I'm 45, and I've had my little niggles. I've popped knees here and there. I've done things to my neck here and there, but I'm bouncing back every time. And I feel like I will outperform 19-year-old Nick any day of the week. The only difference being that in your 19, you can probably do it for a few hours more in a row. But there's no need to do that, and I've got other responsibilities, so it doesn't really matter.
So I think that's the thing. Like in the surf world, there's this whole notion that lifting weights is bad for your surfing. And don't get me wrong, if you go onto a bodybuilding program and you start smashing back 4,000 calories and trying to be the next Lou Ferrigno or Jay Cutler, by all means, you're going to be on a sup in no time at all. But having a proper training program that's designed for you to help the imbalances is just going to push your surfing. I mean, you look at the likes of Isla Ferreira, I know it's highlight reels on Insta and all that lot, but the guy's got maybe 150 kilo on his back, and he's squatting and he's doing these power training and he's pushing these sleds that have got some decent weight behind them.
No one's bodies are going to survive the impact he puts it through those huge, huge rotational airs, landing on the flats. Gabriel Medina as well. He does not look like a guy that doesn't train. He trains. John used to say, I don't train, I just surf. And he blew his knee out twice in a row. Now that guy trains.
Yeah.
And the various other surfers, if you want to elevate your performance and become acrobatic with surfing particularly, then you're going to have to build up some joint resilience, because your knees are unlikely to survive that kind of abuse from surfing. And it's the same with jiu-jitsu. If you're just going to abuse them and not do anything to support your body, and any other sport, look at all the professional Olympic sports and all that stuff. Those guys are training, and the whole essence of Olympics is exactly that. And cross training and doing other sports. No one was ever so one-dimensional in the origins of it all. So
exactly, you got to not look at it from a bodybuilding point of view, but look at it from a power output. If you can, and the injury prevention, if you can increase your power to strength and power to weight ratio, you're fine.
Also, nobody's going to accidentally become a bodybuilder, by the way.
No.
So you got to start lifting. Don't worry about it. If you go, I don't want to bulk up, don't worry about it. You won't, because it takes a hell of a lot of effort and discipline and consistency in that area to achieve that, to eat all the food that they're going to eat and to get the timing of that right. And all
exactly.
You won't accidentally put on 50 kilos of muscle, I promise you.
Yeah, you got some serious genetics if that's the case. But yeah, so no, perfect. I mean, is there anything you change now? I mean, obviously you put the effort in when you were 16 to make life happen how you wanted it to. You made that big relocation at such a young age. But is there anything you would maybe tweak if you were able to go back?
Yeah, it's interesting that, because 100% there's a couple of elements to that I would change. But that's the hindsight of wisdom as you get older. You look back at what you did and you go, okay, there's a couple of really key things. I came here when I was 16 and I hated school. but I hated the area that I lived in. It wasn't a bad area. I just was bored. I wanted to be by the sea and I wanted to surf. And so I was distracted by that, and I didn't pay attention at school. I was very capable. I had no problem learning, and I've proven it time and again, but I didn't I didn't build a relationship with my teachers, and I just didn't really want to be there. I didn't necessarily hate learning. I just didn't want to do it in that environment. I'd watch Home and Away on TV and see those kids, as Summer Bay, and they're going to school and they leave school at the beach. I'm like, why can't that be my life? And I made it my life. So when I came down here, my parents said to me, okay, well, if that's what you want to do, fine, but you've got to do it yourself. That means you've got to go and get a job and X, Y, Z. And I think they wanted me to not stay and then, realize how hard life is and go running back. But it wasn't going to happen. I ended up on the dole and various things. And I think on reflection, had I been told, listen, you can go down, equivalent of the dole is like, well, at the time, like 35 quid a week. We'll help you out with 35 quid a week. You're going to school. And I would have said, all right, but I can be a Nuki and go to school. So I'll go and do, I actually screwed up my GCSEs. They could have made me redo them. Fine. At least at the end of the day, I'll be here and I'll finish school and I'll go surfing and I'll be a stone's throw from the beach. So that's one thing. And then, I came down here and didn't quite grasp how the town was going to up sticks and leave come the winter. Yeah. So I'm here and this is brilliant. Oh, this is great. I'd only really properly experienced the summer. And so that love of it and the hustle and all these people that moved in, the transient people that come to work in the summer, and they're having such a good time. They're all cool. They're all a little bit older than me. And then they all disappeared. And I didn't really have probably the confidence to imagine myself going out into the wider world at that time. And I actually think, and I've actually read and heard stories of other people my age that did similar things in other parts of the world. And I'm like, why didn't I just pack up too and do the same thing that I did when I was 15 in Nuki, work my way down through Europe, or go further, go to Hawaii and go sleep in a bush, on the North Shore at 17 years old, because you're very quickly going to get helped out as a young kid, just saying, this is what I'm prepared to do, alone. Somebody would help you out. And I've read and heard so many really, really cool stories. I don't know if it would work now, but it would have worked then. And I didn't really see that. And I'm kind of like, I kind of wish I had, because that guy that I heard a story from did exactly what I did. That guy did exactly what I did. They just did it in more, advanced places for surfing, and it just probably opened more doors. And I think, and then, another point in my life, as 17, I ended up going to the Algarve and working for 4 months in a family friend's restaurant. And I was stuck there going, there's no surf. It was the south coast of the Algarve. There's no surf all summer. I was annoyed. I'd go to the west coast once a week, and then got to the end of the summer and I couldn't wait to come home to Nuki, where my friends were and also where I knew there would be waves. But what I didn't realize was that region of the Algarve was probably about to turn on and never drop below 18 degrees. Yeah. And I had a place I could stay. They weren't kicking me out. The restaurant people gave us all a flat, and they said you could have stayed if you wanted. And I just couldn't wait to get back. So I got back, after that summer, spunked all my money, and I was back on the dole in the freezing cold, and I had this opportunity. I could have explored Portugal. And we're talking about like 1999 or 1998, I think it was. It's like, what a time to have been able to be in Europe as a young lad, just, trying to get on and exploring the world a little bit. So I look back at that, but at the same time, you learn your lessons along the way, and it builds up the wisdom that you have, and it just, teaches things that you need to know. Yeah. And hopefully by sharing stories, you can inspire other people to do things. I've got my own kids to hopefully influence in certain ways, whether they appreciate it or not, I don't know.
One day. So would you, if you could pass on one little pearl of wisdom, what would it be? Probably just get out and enjoy it.
I'd say, whatever it is that's like nagging at you that you need to do, is sort of like, think of it like pushing over the ledge. And I take that from one of the early sort of little anecdotes I got about people into bigger waves. It's just that there's certain little groups within the surf world that will just push that thing over the ledge. And I think it's an interesting metaphor, big wave surfing. Some people don't want to touch it ever, not any element of it. They just want to be comfortable. That resonates into life too. You don't have to be good at big wave surfing, for example. You just need to survive. You don't have to be good at the thing that's nagging at you that you really want to do. But if you never push yourself over the ledge and give it a go to some element, whatever it is that's in your head that you must do, you'll never find out. And you can stay in a comfort zone, but you promise you'll be disappointed. Take a bit of a risk. Life's got a funny way of giving you more and more chances if you're open to it. And I'll personally, I like to think that I'm a student of life. So I'm happy to take lessons from people. That's another thing. I say I don't mind learning. I will listen to people, definitely. You need to find some commonality and build some relationship with people. If you can prove yourself that you've got something to share, I'll happily listen to it. I'd happily, be in a room with you and in a physical training environment, I'd happily have you show me things about mobility. I know lots about mobility, but I'm actually doing stuff with a guy at the moment in Nuki where we've got a shared course that we're running, and he's doing the mobility. I could do the mobility for the group that are coming, but I'm happy to just shut up and let him do it, and I'm picking up stuff from him. The stuff
Yeah.
I'm going to bring into my jiu-jitsu club and show those guys that I learned from this guy. It's not like I don't know mobility. Same with breath hold and underwater training. And I've got Anthony Mullally, the guy who does my strength training. He's doing deep end fitness with us, and he's going to certify me. I'm looking to him. He's not a natural water guy. He's not a surfer. He's a rugby player, muscle bound. But he's the guy that's gone out there to San Diego, train with the deep end fitness, and he's telling me stuff about how to manage myself underwater. It's like I've been underwater a lot longer than he has, but he's got stuff,
Yeah.
and I'm happy to have those lessons from him. He's gone out and shown his humility and taken on some learning of his own, and he's sharing that with us. And I'm happy to be a student. Always be a student as well, push over
Yeah.
the ledge, but be prepared to listen to people about what might be down there before you jump.
That's it. Just staying humble and open. I think it's Bruce Lee, wasn't it? Have a beginner's learner's mind with
Yeah.
anything. Yeah, sack the ego off. It's not much use to anyone.
The important part of jiu-jitsu is to sack an ego. Everybody's going to have some, and an ego doesn't have to be bad, but it can be bad. How you use your ego is, that can be quite determined about whether it's bad and how you use it amongst other people.
Yeah.
And we've all got an ability to make people feel a certain way. If somebody's like take jiu-jitsu, you might have somebody smaller than you that's better than you, but your ego gets in the way. So whilst they get better than you, you start to get rough and ready with them and just, do some pretty unnecessary ways of using your weight and sort of, rough housing them. It's like you're missing the opportunity to learn from this person that's better than you. It particularly happens with women in a jiu-jitsu environment that they might be more skilled, but they're often lighter and weaker. And then you've got guys who are like, well, I'll just smash her then. It's like, yeah, you're big and strong. You can smash this girl right now, but she's got stuff that she can show you.
She's able to, if she's take, for example, 65 kilos and you're 95, learn from her.
Yes.
Because if you
See
go to
how
the
she
club,
wants to
yeah,
sweep you. Yeah, see how
yeah,
she sets up a submission. Don't try to stop it. Why not figure this out? What is it that she's doing? Because one day you at 90 kilos is going to meet the guy at 140
yeah,
who can move, or 110, Anthony, who's 110 and can move. If
yeah,
you're 90 and you can't really move that well, you can just shove your weight on people. Anthony's going to absolutely smash you.
yeah,
And so you want to learn from that girl that's a lot lighter than you, and drop your ego because she will show you. My wife's a brown belt and she's 58 kilos or something like that. So she's small. She gets going. Eventually, if you let her get going, you won't get her off. So sometimes, heavier guys just won't ever let her get going because they don't want to be shown,
yeah.
that they get stuck. It's like you're missing a trick, mate.
That's it. Every day's a school day.
Definitely.
Well, look, we've actually gone to the hour mark, but it's been absolutely brilliant having you on, Nick. And I think the first time we've actually managed to have a chat despite living in the same town. So yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. We'll pop a link to Northshore Jiu Jitsu in the comments in the description. And yeah, hopefully get you on again and maybe we'll delve into a bit more about the big wave surfing.
Yeah, I'd happily come back on and chat to you more. There's loads of stuff I think we can open up. There's stuff I'd love to share with people. So if anybody does want to reach out about any part of this, just get in touch. I'm pretty approachable. The club's very welcoming and open for people to want to kind of explore what it is that we do, from beginner courses and stuff like that. And I work with people on a one-to-one basis as a coach, encompassing all of these things and the lessons that are learned along the way. So happy to share that with people.
Perfect. Well, thanks for that, Nick, and we'll chat again soon.
Yeah, no worries, mate.
Hi, I really hope you enjoyed that podcast. If you're interested in anything that guest has to say today, then please have a look in the description for their links. Please feel free to like, share and subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next episode.